sucks today to hear about Josh Youngblood. It does. So 24/7 Sports, I believe, was the first to report it because they seemingly have access to the transfer portal. Whenever somebody hits the transfer portal, they are typically the first to put it out there. Kellis Robinette also confirmed it after that. So this is tough, and there's a lot that comes with this. I would say this hurts my heart more than my head, and it hurts the potential of the future more than it does the potential of this season. I think both of those things are very obvious here. And this is always tricky and tough when a situation like this comes up because I certainly don't want to bury the kid. I also want to try to be as forthright and honest with you as I can about what has happened here because I know that a lot of people will look at this and very easily say, well, what happened? I mean, this was a freshman All-American from last year, somebody who stayed with Chris Kleiman in his own home this offseason when he had surgery and clearly seemed to be somebody that was very well liked last year. I mean, there were a lot of fun things that happened with Josh Youngblood last year, and he was made available to the media all the time. Seemed in all my interactions with him like a very good guy. I mean, I never had any issues with Josh Youngblood at all, and it felt like he had a really good head on his shoulders. And so when things like this go south, I think there is a tendency to pile on the player and get frustrated and mad at the player, and I don't want that to happen here at all. I would also say, if I'm being honest with you, there are some pieces to the puzzle that you can start to put together. Like, Josh Youngblood played, I remember one snap of Youngblood at receiver on Saturday. Now, there were probably more. I'm sure there were more. But the only snap, I just remember once because it looked like he slipped a little bit coming out of a break, and I just remember noticing that like on a route on the sideline. And how many times did you notice that DJ Render was in the game? Okay, DJ Render is a guy who played defensive back, played receiver, then played defensive back, and then moved back to receiver this year when depth was needed more at receiver. And DJ Render's, I like DJ a lot, but that is somebody that was way, way down the depth chart at receiver, and all of a sudden, he's getting a bunch of targets in the game, and Josh Youngblood can barely get on the field at wide receiver. I don't think that's for a lack of opportunity from the coaching staff giving Josh Youngblood an opportunity to play and giving him an opportunity to get on the field. He was back there returning kicks, didn't have a chance to return a single one in the game, but he was out there at returner. He wasn't out there at receiver. I have made this point when we talk about Jacardier Wright at running back. This is not a staff that's going to just hold the better and more athletic players off the field for the hell of it or because they're stubborn like Bill Snyder would. This is a different world, and that's been proven all across the board. I mean, they're talking today when we spoke with the coaches about giving Deuce Vaughn like 22, 23 touches per game. He's a true freshman. I mean, that's not what any of this is about. So you'll have to do some of the detective work on that, but I think it's pretty clear Youngblood had the talent to be able to at least carve out some role within the offense this year. And through 4 games of this season, we know that he had 1 touch offensively. He had 1 carry and no receptions and one game where he is not out there, right? 1 game where he is not out there and not on the sideline. So that's the tale of the tape this year for what happened with Youngblood. Seems like there was a breakdown somewhere there in the things being done that the coaching staff wanted to have done in order for him to get on the field. And now we find out in the middle of a season he's transferring, and I will just say I'm not surprised. Unfortunately, I'm not surprised just based on how this had seemingly unfolded since the beginning of the season started. It hurts my heart, man, because he was such a fun guy to watch last year, such a fun guy to be around, and seemed like he had such a promising career here at K-State. But it's the way of the world, and transfers are a big part of football, and I think we saw some signs based on what was happening on the field as to where, unfortunately, this was headed.
I always go back and rewatch the games on Monday, kind of take notes as I go along, who made some nice plays, make sure I write them down so I know to give them the props whenever I can here on the show. And the first 2 games were done by Fox, right? Joe Klatt would give his key players of the game, and he would bring up Joshua Youngblood. About you got to watch out for this kid. He is a dynamic kick returner, All-American, brought 3 kicks back last year. He scored a touchdown against Oklahoma, which that's the thing. He only touched the ball when he was returning a kick or on a jet sweep, which he did score in a jet sweep against Oklahoma in that big upset win last year. But then it turned into him just kind of being invisible on the field. He was out there, he was playing, but he wasn't touching the football, and he wasn't really doing anything. And it got to the point where I wasn't even expecting to hear his name called. I was thinking about other people making big plays. It's because he's been basically replaced. He's been replaced as the big playmaker. K-State hasn't been dynamic on the special teams, like bringing kicks back for a score, even though I think Phillip Brooks has done a pretty darn good job.
Well, see, I would argue K-State's been equally as dynamic on special teams this year, just in different ways. And I mean, that's a part of this where a lot of things have moved on with the team. They're still being equally as successful, if not more successful, and it has not included Joshua Youngblood. I want to say this at the same time. Before, if you are somebody that your natural instinct is to, try to pile on a kid, keep in mind this can't have been an easy time for Joshua Youngblood over the last 6 months or so. This has not been an easy time for anybody, but he spent a lot of time. I don't think he made it back home very much during the offseason because he had to have that surgery that we now know about, where he stayed here in Manhattan, lived with Chris Kleiman for a little while. So during COVID, he's 1,300 miles away from home. This is a kid from Tampa. So he's 1,300 miles away from home, needed major surgery on both of his legs. It was bad shin splint issues with both legs. So that's pretty debilitating. And because of that, you're having to live with your head coach away from a lot of your teammates, away from friends and family, and just not being able to have the typical offseason that you would want to have. That ain't easy, okay? That's not an easy thing to deal with. And so that I can see how that would send some things going in a bad direction. I can see just how that would be a tough thing to deal with here. And he did give your school, if you're a K-State fan, a lot of joy last year with the kickoff return for touchdowns that he had. And no matter what happens from here on out in his career, had an awesome freshman year that really helped K-State with a nice season and jumpstart the Chris Kleiman era. So just don't forget about that. Totally fine with you being disappointed about this. And I still think, obviously, on special teams, the guy could have continued. I mean, he could have had a David Allen sort of a career arc, potentially, on special teams. He still needed to show me that he could make a major impact at receiver, but I think they could have found a role for him if he had been doing everything that needed to be done. I think that still could have happened. So be sad about the future, be sad about missing out on what it was last year, and be sad that it just didn't work out for him here, a guy that we all seem to really like. I just always would want to caution, don't pile on too much here. Don't hop in the guy's Twitter mentions. And just be confident in where the program is going, because that's the other part of this. K-State's going to be fine. It sucks, and I wish it was that K-State was going to be fine with Joshua Youngblood. It's not going to be the case. Still think the program's going to be absolutely fine.
And I would agree with you, because you mentioned earlier, you brought up, in your heart you're sad, but in your mind we're going to be fine. And that's the thing. In my heart, what's lying in there is that I think about what could have been. I know what happened in the past. But, man, if he improves a little bit, keeps his game up, gets better and better each season, boy, by the time he's a senior, his name is going to be on the Ring of Honor possibly. He's been so dynamic for K-State football. But then I think about this year, in the 4 games we've had so far, they've gotten by without him. And I mentioned earlier, he's been replaced as a big playmaker, Deuce Vaughn, Briley Moore. Now I think K-State will be fine without him. But Coach Kleiman and staff have been good at recruiting. They can find another Youngblood.
And, as we said early in the year, when you looked at Sebastian Taylor and you looked at Deuce Vaughn and Briley Moore, I mean, you're looking at it and seeing, hey, this team is getting more athletic. Keon Mosey, yeah, they have athletes. They have found guys. They're going to be okay. And it's pretty telling when wide receiver has been really the weakest position group on the team, and Youngblood had not been able to find much playing time at all there. So, yes, I think that's all very indicative of how things will shake out the rest of this year. It definitely hurts your heart more than it hurts your head. I think that's the easiest way to summarize this Joshua Youngblood news today.